Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, has been testifying in front of Congress over the last 2 days. In fact, yesterday he testified before the Senate Judiciary and Commerce Committees. And we have some video showing you some of the incompetence from these senators in just a moment. But he also testified today in front of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. And in today's testimony, it seemed as though the lawmakers were a little more tech savvy and had tougher questions for Zuckerberg. And the whole point of these hearings is to figure out how our data is being utilized by Facebook, what type of measures they're taking to protect our privacy. And the lawmakers also utilize this time in order to ask some politically charged questions in regard to the types of political content that people end up seeing on their feeds. Now, Lindsey Graham said something that I thought was really interesting yesterday. He said, quote, "Most Americans have no idea what they're signing up for because Facebook's terms of service are beyond comprehension." And so a common answer that Zuckerberg had to a lot of these privacy-related questions was that, there are certain things that are very clear in their, terms of service, and that people wittingly share personal information about themselves. And so, he took ownership and responsibility for their mistakes and their failures when it came to scandals like the Cambridge Analytica scandal. However, the lawmakers are also having a difficult time trying to figure out what Facebook is. What is it defined as? Is it a utility similar to other businesses that would be regulated under the FCC or enforced under the FCC? Is it considered a publisher or a media organization, which would have to deal with different regulations? And to be quite honest with you, I'm unsure whether or not they came up with an answer in these hearings. But with that said, I do want to go to the first video because it gives you a sense of where Republican lawmakers were coming from when it came to the questions and what kind of answers they were seeking from Zuckerberg. Take a look.
To a great many Americans, that appears to be a pervasive pattern of political bias. Do you agree with that assessment?
Senator, let me say a few things about this. First, I understand where that concern is coming from because Facebook and the tech industry are located in Silicon Valley, which is an extremely left-leaning place. And this is actually a concern that I have and that I try to root out in the company, is making sure that we don't have any bias in the work that we do. And I think it is a fair concern that that people would at least wonder about.
Let me ask this question. Are you aware of any ad or page that has been taken down from Planned Parenthood?
Senator, I'm not, but let me just...
How about MoveOn.org?
Sorry?
How about MoveOn.org?
I'm not specifically aware of those.
How about
cases.
any Democratic candidate for office?
I'm not specifically aware. I mean, I'm not sure.
In your testimony, you say that you have 15 to 20,000 people working on security and content review. Do you know the political orientation of those 15 to 20,000 people engaged in content review?
No, Senator, we do not generally ask people about their political orientation when they're joining the company.
I think there are laws against asking potential employees what their political affiliation is. And even if there weren't laws protecting people from discrimination in regard to their political viewpoints, really, you think that Mark Zuckerberg is going to know the political identities of 20,000 employees? I mean, that was such a ridiculous question.
Okay, we're going to get to criticism of Facebook in a second. Okay,
yes.
But because the Republican line of questioning was so absurd, I have to address that first. So they're saying, oh, again, they're triggered. And the snowflakes are like, oh my God, you're discriminating against us. What's your evidence? Diamond and Silk. What? Okay, so they wouldn't stop talking about Diamond and Silk. I'm like, what the hell is going on with Diamond and Silk? It's because it turns out the goofballs at Fox News have been talking about Diamond and Silk.
Right.
These two women who do a comedic bit where they pretend to be for Trump or they think they actually are for Trump. I don't care. I interviewed them before. I went along with it. It's a nice little bit. I don't care. So they turned Diamond and Silk into like some sort of like Watergate situation.
Well,
okay.
Look, let me jump in very quickly and give you guys more context into what happened with Diamond and Silk. So apparently their Facebook page was censored in some way because Facebook, like every other tech company right now, uses an algorithm. And unfortunately, that algorithm wrongfully shut down their page. And so conservatives use that as, and by the way, they immediately reinstated the page, right? As soon as they figured out that there was a mistake, they reinstated the page. There wasn't some sort of like political hit job to get rid of Diamond and Silk.
Nonsense. It's nonsense. Do you know how many pages that has happened to? It's just that they picked the one thing. Oh, Diamond and Silk happens to be conservative. It's a conspiracy against us. It's a conspiracy because they're lunatics. Ted Cruz on his website talked about how the United Nations wants to force all of us into hobbit homes. That was a quote from his website, okay? So, they take these things and they blow them out of proportion. So a lot of Facebook pages that has happened to. There's no conspiracy. The IRS, same thing. Oh my God, they're targeting conservatives. And then they actually, when you did the whole story and you found out by the end, no, they'd actually targeted more liberals than conservatives. But at that point, they'd already had hearings and Fox News had run it 1,000 times. So no one ever got to find out the reality, or the ones who did are the ones who actually bother reading papers. So here, Zuckerberg comes in, there's real issues to talk about. Giant issues about our privacy, about how we're running things. The people who write the algorithms are in a way setting our culture. That is such an amazing and interesting topic. Yeah. But they spent half the time talking about Diamond and Silk, who got their page taken down for 3.5 seconds, which happens to a lot of people, and they pretend it's why? And why do they whine and whine and whine to the refs? So that Facebook, the next time anything happens, goes, make sure that you treat the right wing with kids' gloves. Don't do anything to them. And by the way, if anyone ever takes anything down from social media that's right wing, well, you know why? And it's real and it's substantive and they keep it down, you know why? Because almost every time it's about threats of violence, it's about over-the-top racism and the hideous, hideous crap that they believe. Now, you want to own up to it, Ted Cruz, and go, why would you censor things from the alt-right, from the neo-Nazis that vote Republican all the time? Then at least have the courage to say it. But when you're talking about a glitch, because you don't want to admit when Twitter, for example, takes things down, it's because your guys threaten violence.
So let me just jump in and give you guys further context, because it is important. So a couple of years ago, there was this big scandal involving the trending section on Facebook's newsfeed. And as we all know, what we see on our newsfeed varies based on who we are. They tailor the content based on what they assume you're gonna like or what you wanna see, which I think is a disastrous idea. I wanna see perspectives different from my own because I don't want to exist in a bubble. So that is a legitimate conversation to have. Those are legitimate questions to ask. Now, a couple of years ago, the trending section for news on Facebook was curated by actual people. And it was exposed that those very people were filtering out some conservative perspectives, conservative stories, which, by the way, I think it's a fair criticism to point that out. In response, Facebook said, no, well, people have biases, so what we're gonna do is we're going to allow an algorithm to decide what will trend in the news section. But here's the thing, there was a huge flaw with that as well, because once they allowed an algorithm to take charge, people working in these troll farms found a way to game that system, game that algorithm, and all of a sudden, all this fake news would consistently appear in that trending section. So it's a very complicated, difficult issue, it's complex. And one other thing I wanted to add, real quick, Cenk. Look, it happens to both liberals and conservatives. The algorithm will wrongfully censor something that it shouldn't censor. The only difference is that conservatives will successfully make a big deal about it, whereas liberals, they just sit back and, I don't know, they're not as vociferous about it.
Well, I am, and that's why I'm so mad about this, because this is how they fix the game. So if you go to the Breitbarts of the world, they print lies all the time. So if Facebook has a human curator who goes, well, that is not a trustworthy news source because that story turned out to be wrong, it's factually incorrect. Not that I disagree with its opinion. You name a conservative website, and I can name you dozens of lies that they printed on purpose, okay? So then they go, what? You're discriminating against conservatives. So why? Because they want to equate the truth with the lies. They wanted Facebook to call it even. Okay, one side lies, the other side doesn't. You have to call it even, otherwise I'm gonna cry, and I'm gonna make a big stink on national television, and I'm gonna put all sorts of political pressure on you, right? And on top of that, they're gonna want, now what is Facebook gonna lean to do? Okay, I wanna make sure Ted Cruz doesn't yell at me. Okay, go after the progressives. Show them how tough we are against the progressives, and conservatives never touch them. It doesn't matter if they spread fake news. Almost all of the fake news during the election was right-wing fake news. That's a fact. That's a fact. So you guys spread the lies over and over again, and when anyone does anything about it, all you do is cry and demand a safe space. Facebook is not your safe space. These are private corporations, and look, they've got a lot of faults, and for God's sake, we should talk about that, and we're going to. But it isn't, one of their faults is not that they discriminate against conservatives. If anything, they bend over backwards, and in fact, the election, Trump won because they let right-wingers spread fake news, and they let Cambridge Analytica take our information of 87 million people and use it on behalf of your lies. Have the decency for at least not cry about it, you whining little bitch, Ted Cruz. Have I been clear enough? So yes, Anna, it's about time that a progressive fights back. But our Democratic senators sit there and our Democratic reps sit there. And yes, they ask legitimate and good questions from time to time, but they never do what the Republicans do. So yeah, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. So, okay, anyway, that's clear. Now on to Facebook. Look, guys, I can summarize the whole thing for you in one simple explanation, and this is all they should have talked about. Opt-in versus opt-out, okay? So right now, what Facebook does is opt-out system. What that means is you give them all the rights to all your information unless you opt out, unless you choose to actively opt out and say you cannot use my information. Now, almost no one does that. A system that the Europeans are pushing for, and ones that smart senators ask them about, and Kamala Harris has some really good questions. Fair is fair, good credit to people who ask good questions. And by the way, in an ironic way, I'll give credit to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham in a second, okay? So if you do a system where it's opt-in, that they cannot take your data unless you say, yes, it's okay to track me and to take my data and use it for advertising purposes, et cetera. Almost no one will do that. The difference between opt-in and opt-out for a company like Facebook is tens, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars. That's everything. Opt-in versus opt-out is everything. If they demand that Facebook go to an opt-in system, Facebook is going to get massively devalued. So Zuckerberg is sitting there in his suit thinking, oh, please don't ask too much about opt-in versus opt-out. Please don't ask about it. And these goofballs come in and use all their time to ask about diamond and silk. So ask them the real questions. And that's a hell of a question, and that's a real tough question. And it's a fair question our whole society should answer. And I'm not sure that I have the answer to it, but I'm certainly curious what Zuckerberg would have answered if anyone bothered to ask him. If you become a member of the Young Turks, you'll be saying,
you know, I'm like a smart person.
So do it right now, tytnetwork.com/join. Get the whole Young Turks show every day.